Hi, I'm Doug Vogt from the Downhill Foundation, and I promised all of you a scientific explanation of why the Earth's rotation slows down, stops, and then reverses and goes in the opposite direction to explain what causes the great floods and the deep sea canyons over the world. So this video is it. We'll cover the Coriolis effect or force, what causes the Earth's rotation, how matter comes into this existence, and why the Earth's rotation reverses during the polar reversal. Much of it comes from chapters 3 and chapter 8 of this book, but also from several others also. Theory of multidimensional reality, which is the third iteration of the theory, as well as creation of the Hebrew alphabet. For those of you who are atheists, or every time you see this, it's like dragging nails across a blackboard because you think I'm trying to teach a religion or something like that. This is a science book. It's to show you what Moses had pulled out was something that he couldn't have created, and that's why the Library of Congress indexed it quantum computing. So a light bulb should go off in your head. This is really a science book. I'm going to go through some of the things that does not cause the Great Flood, because that's really what everybody was scared about. And I've read a number of the comments and emails people have sent me, so I want to make sure you understand what does not cause the Great Flood, which is the result of the Earth stopping its rotation and going the other way. This is actually the wobble of the magnetic field of the Earth. Here's the reference for it in Nature back in 1971. And this whole cycle happens over roughly 2,000 years. Now remember, this is like, east would be Nova Zembla. This is roughly, here's the Canadian one, and here's someplace over China, Vladivostok area. And this is the path it takes, pretty organized, every 120 degrees. But this doesn't affect the axis of the Earth. It's just something's going on in the center of the Earth that the pole, the magnetic pole, is moving around like this. Okay, the other theory, which has been pretty successful, is the geodynamo theory. It's been around for quite a while. And one of the proponents of it is called professor at UCLA, who I knew, F. Busey. And I actually have his journal article. He actually gave me this printout that he got from Nature. See, that's what they give you, and gave it to me. And we had a nice long talk. Anyway, there's 5 reasons why this geodynamo theory doesn't work, and you're going to find out why. I repeated this. This is from, I think, part 1 of the earlier series in section 4. Anyway, the reasons are the melting point of iron is 950 or so, and above the Curie temperature, it's no longer a magnetic field. So that's why the center of the Earth is not an iron core. It's just not. I think we're just stuck with the idea of a bar magnet someplace. We see the effects of a bar magnet, so therefore, oh, the center of the Earth must be a bar magnet, you know. 2, the theory is dependent on convection currents being driven by seismic earthquakes, but is pure conjecture. Earthquakes couldn't generate a fast enough convection current to maintain a stable magnetic field. There just isn't enough earthquakes or vibrations to make this convection current go fast enough to make the electrostatic field. 3, the biggest problem with toroidal geodynamo theory is that toroidal vector fields cannot act as dynamos because their magnetic fields cross themselves and they cancel themselves out and produce no voltage. Therefore, no magnetic field. Here's the 2 references, Busey's article, right here. And this guy, Geomagnetic Dynamos in a Stable Core. There's the references, go check them out yourself. Now I've added 2 more reasons here which they didn't want to tackle. 4, it cannot explain the cyclical nature of the reversals, which I think I've effectively proved with the geomagnetic reversals and the ice ages with the carbon-14 dating. There's no question this thing happens cyclically through time. They can't explain it at all with this theory. 5, when the field reverses, it cannot explain why the Earth changes rotation and rotates in the opposite direction, which I'm attempting to prove to you now, but I'm going to prove to you scientifically. It goes down to the atom. Now, originally I showed you deep sea canyons. I thought that was enough to prove to you that the Earth's rotation changes, stops, and then goes the other way. This is the deep sea canyons on here's San Francisco and here's Monterey Bay. And this goes all the way down to about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. And this is obviously done by rushing water all along here. Every single one of these smaller ones, here's San Francisco, makes a nice cut in the continental shelf here. You can't explain this unless no seawater is there. So water's coming over the continent, pouring over the continental shelf, and cutting these ridges. Somebody actually thought it was only one cycle that did this. No, this is over hundreds upon hundreds of reversals. This happens. It's not just overnight and one reversal and one flooding does this. That actually, that alone basically proves that this thing happens cyclically through time, long periods of time. Here's on the East Coast, Cape Hatteras, off the coast of North Carolina. This actually, 4,000 meters, this is 13,000 feet below sea level. It just keeps going. All very obvious. It was all done by water, and there was no ocean water there. All along the entire continental shelf, you could see it. It's as plain as day. You got to be blind not to see it. Here's the Norfolk Canyon, all the way down to the bottom of the Atlantic, the Washington, which is the Potomac River, goes all the way down to the bottom. Can't explain this unless no seawater was there. And water rushed over the continent and continued to cut deeper and deeper gorges on the continental shelf over repeated times. This is what the result of this reversal is. This is what you're all scared about. An artist did this, did a wonderful job. I wish I knew who the artist was. I'd give him credit. You're going to see a wall of water coming towards you. This isn't like a tsunami where, I'll try to show it. Seafloor, it buckles like that, pushes ocean water up like this, and that spreads out pretty fast. That may be 20, 30, or 40-foot wave, and that's it. This is totally different. This is the entire mass of the ocean coming towards you immediately. It's totally different. But it's a nice picture anyway. Here's another example, which is probably closer to what it's going to be like in some places. This would have been basically the height of what the water is in the continental shelf. After that, it goes down to a mile or more, and you're going to have that coming towards you. But it'll be more or less a straight line, you know, because it's all about the same depth. And it'll come towards you like this real fast. This picture was done by Dario Di Natale, obviously Italian, but I wish he did a great job. The only thing that was wrong with it, this water here would be coming towards you also. And it'll be a wave of water that's going to be very huge, and depending on how deep the ocean is next to you, it's going to come like this, but it's going to be straight. It won't be these mounds like this. It's going to be more or less straight, one even depth, and coming towards you real fast. Now, I should probably tell about the speed. Water has mass, that has information. The gravity doesn't go away also. Some people actually thought that. No, the gravity still exists because the planet still exists. It has information. It's still being directed to a point in time and space in the middle. So it may not go at 700 or 800 or 600 miles an hour. It may be at 300 or 400 miles an hour at first, but I think it settles down to about 300 miles an hour. This is the report that I showed earlier by RAND Corporation. This is the Air Force wanted to know why the Earth's rotation was slowing down, because they wanted to be able to deliver a bomb exactly on the target and not a couple of seconds later, which they'd missed the target. So they paid for it. You can see the earlier reports in I think it's part 1 of Series 4. And the result was they knew that the velocity of the Earth would decrease sharply because the magnetic field was decreasing. They knew the connection was there. Now, whether the people in the Air Force cared about that, they knew the Earth's magnetic field has something to do with its rotation. Whether they connected, okay, what if this thing reverses like we know it has throughout time? What happens then with the rotation? I don't know firsthand if they connected the two, but they could have known it. Coriolis effect is something that it's kind of a phenomenon how water goes down. In the northern hemisphere, it's counterclockwise. Southern, it's clockwise. The explanation you can look it online, but this explains some of it basically. You have to have a rotating frame of reference, namely the globe. And they say the distance up here is going faster than the one down here, therefore there's a differential. But I'm not too sure I really believe that, especially this is a whirlpool that was discovered in Latvia. Clear lake, not very deep, and a sinkhole must have opened up in the bottom and water started pouring down. I think the lake actually drained totally. But it started going counterclockwise. Now, what told the water here and the water there to go counterclockwise? It's down to the atomic level is really what I'm trying to get at to you. I'm going to give you a real scientific explanation of why the rotation. Now we get to physics or quantum mechanics. This is actually a Chinese paper done in 2014. And this is, I showed earlier, this is a hydrogen atom, 256 picometers. What a pico is 1/trillionth of a meter, really tiny. This is the information of the hydrogen atom, or any atom, as it goes into this dimension. This is the electron field out here. This is actually what you see, this. You don't really see this, but the real business is going on right here as this thing blinks in and out of existence. So this is a model of a spherical surface of radius r, which is the radius here, and its coordinate system, that x, y, z, as it goes across, as it rotates. The green arrow denotes the direction of the magnetic field B going up on one of its poles, which is perpendicular to the plane of that pi divided by 2. Notice it was rotating. This is basically an atom going through time. And an electrostatic field would be this round part here. And this is the magnetic field created perpendicular or 90 degrees out of phase from how it's going through time. When you take a tube, which is what it's doing, and you connect the two ends, you wind up with a toroid. And this goes through the same thing, x, y, z coordinates, radius, stuff like that. This is basically an atom as it goes around through time, creating its electrostatic field and its magnetic field. And that was the magnetic field is most likely has something to do with the information itself, whether it's the carrier wave that contains all the thousands of frequencies that make up the atom, or it's something else, a phasing of it. The conclusion of the paper, the Chinese paper, was this. It's kind of important. The paper concludes by stating that the Schrodinger equation for a reduced system and the Pauli equation have opposite signs, positive, negative. One is attractive and the other repulsive. That means opposite spin. So the atom spins in a different direction depending on the phasing. Here's another physicist had the same thing, a different kind of drawing. South pole here, south orientation with a plus. Here's a negative one down here, negative sign. Opposites, all because of spin. This is all quantum mechanics. Here's another one, quantum mechanics, where they show the path that this atom goes through, but also showing that it flips over on itself, which I think I showed you in this book. How do you like that? You see, Well, a friend of mine, Owen Redcliffe, was a PhD in physics, and he said, Doug, you found the philosophy that string theorists have been looking for, but really it's for both quantum mechanics and string theory. They're both partially right and partially wrong. They just needed a new way of looking at existence. Now my famous graph. What's going on here, this is going through time, this, the atom, is going through time. The difference between quantum mechanics and myself is I'm saying there's a carrier wave that contains all the thousands of pieces of information, frequencies, that make up that atom, whether it be hydrogen or U-238 or californium, whatever it is, doesn't matter. The spikes between here and here, this could be Planck's time, or between a whole 360 degrees would be Planck's time. I don't know, this is really a philosophical issue here. And we know this is probably wrong. This is the equation that makes Planck's time, about 5.4 times 10 to the 44 seconds. That's a very, very small piece of time, very small. And I don't know why he took the speed of light to the 5th power. We're created at what we call the speed of light. Why cube it, or why do that to it? I don't know. And h is Planck's constant, which is, this would be Planck's constant, or our matter, what we think our matter world, but really it's contained information potential. And this is, this could be considered like a proton, this is a neutron. That's why in quantum mechanics you have a positron, an electron that has a positive charge, and an electron that has a negative charge. It's probably depending on what you're looking at, what part of the waveform you're looking at, but since this thing goes so fast, we can't tell which one it is. We just know, hey, we got two types of electrons, two types of protons, two types of neutrons, two types of everything. Well, this is the reason why. It's the same thing. As information blinks this atom in and out of existence as it goes through time. Same thing here. This is that. 22 views of this is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There's no question, as Moses said, he didn't create the symbols. And this is not religious. Don't even think this is a religious issue. We've got the technology, or the shadow of a technology of an extremely highly advanced previous civilization. Moses gave us the clues who these people were in the Garden of Eden story, the Adam and Eve story. That's what he was telling us in code. I go through it in the book, Creation of the Hebrew Alphabet, and try to date this thing and the people who did it. So this is the same thing as what Chinese and the quantum mechanics are saying. The atom goes in a circle, it rotates around within itself as it does this whole loop. In other words, this is the x-axis, this little line here. As this waveform crosses the x-axis, it creates, let's say, that. Or crosses the other side, it creates that. The question really is, why? I'm saying the dihole is this computer that creates our reality, creates our whole universe. The real question is, why does the atom do this? Why does it go in a circle? Why doesn't it just keep bleeping in and out of existence at the same point, same coordinates in time and space? Why is it moving around? Now, here's an example. I was a scientist in University of New York at Stony Brook. He sent me his pictures and stuff like that. This is an atom here, and it's moving around. In fact, it's a large atom on a carbon film, and all the atoms on the carbon film are also moving at the same time. They're not quite, nothing's exactly the same. But this thing is actually going and tracing on a toroid, a round shape, through all the pictures he had. And it's moving. Why is it moving so much? They think it was like 3 or 4 angstrom units. It's because the electron microscope who took this picture is imparting about 20,000+ volts to it, and that's the reason why it's moving. Okay, but that's really the question, is why is it moving? This is the reason why. It's the natural log, e to the x. This is the formulas that express the natural log. This is its value, 2.718, and it goes for infinity as far as we know. And I think the last person who figured it out to 115,000 places, which was the founder of Apple, on an Apple computer. This is a natural log curve where it drops off like this. There's two potentials. I showed this earlier. This is what the Earth's magnetic field was at roughly 1900, 31,543 nanoteslas. And this is where it was 2015, 29,422 nanoteslas. It does not have to go to zero before it snaps. Could be 20,000, could be 15,000, but I've said that before in the past. So this is an exponential drop-off or build-up. This shows up, the natural log shows up in everything. Not virtually everything, but absolutely everything, whether it be the charging up of a capacitor, the discharge of a capacitor, explosions, everything has to do with, follows that natural log e to the x. A build-up and a drop-off, and it's not immediate, it always takes this kind of a curve. Now, this angle here, the pyramid angle, which is how I figured out the letters, is the inverse square law plus e, the natural log, and it gives you 52.66 degrees. That's the same, the actual angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza, without the sides, is 52.60 degrees. In other words, I'm only off 0.5 hundredths of a degree off, which is probably what the thing originally was when it had all its limestone. That pyramid was done by an extremely highly advanced previous civilization that knew this formula. They're giving a philosophical reason for building it. It's basically the waveform or the vector of the carrier wave that makes up at least carbon. And maybe a lot more, but certainly that. So this natural log shows up in absolutely everything. Now I'm going to explain why I think the Earth's rotation slows down, when it's connected to it, and why it reverses. And it goes how our reality is created and the different dimensions. Here's my wonderful waveform here. Each dimension above the first would represent this. This is the second dimension, but it could be the information for the fourth, which is us, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth dimension. I define dimensions differently. If you don't see, you should see series 1. I go through the dimensions, all of them in the series. But basically, I divide dimensions not just by length, width, and depth. That's the third dimension. This is a carbon atom, namely it's a diamond. And gee, same shape as this. Isn't it amazing? Gee, I wonder what told it to do this, you know? Anyway, what's going to happen here is, the question is, each dimension probably has its own carrier wave. But I don't think I'll go through, this is 8 of the letters represent this shape. The stuff below here, I think, is what's going on mechanically within the dihole itself. Maybe I shouldn't use the word mechanical, more electronically going on inside the dihole. Maybe the phasing of the different clock waves that they use. The top is, one side would represent the first dimension, which is the information in the dihole. The second would be the transmission dimension. 3 sides is the matter world, inanimate objects. Fourth would be the other side. One of these other sides would be us, animals, bugs, insects, everything that's living. Fifth, now these are the most common letters used in the Torah, plus the 10, which you have to look at the video and find out which 10 they are. These are the 4 least used letters in the Torah, and that's what I believe is probably we don't have the whole program. We have a tiny bit of it, and probably the beginning part of the program. The ones dimensions 5 through 8 represent these. So a planet, I say, is a 7th dimensional existence. So it's possible that this system is going through all the different dimensions. It'll fire off like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, extremely fast, obviously. The other part is this. The reason I have, this is a video card, a very, very high-end video card. Why did I show it? Like all computers, I'm going to give you an example of our computers, maybe the best way of your understanding it. Our computers go at clock speeds of 2 gigahertz up to 4 and 5 gigahertz, some of them. And we don't perceive reality like that. It's just a little too fast. And so we perceive it more like 30 frames per second, but our video cards and our TV are, I think, 96 or 72 cycles a second, hertz. So all that information that's being processed in the computer goes to a video card like this, which puts sound. It takes the engineering drawings, those DXF drawings, stick figures, and creates shapes, gives them color, a dimension, an outside shape, and it makes it with sound, and then it sends it off. This is analogous from here would be the transmission dimension. It sends the signal off, and at some point, some imaginary line, the x-axis, it winds up bursting out the frequencies. It becomes the atom or us or a planet or a star. It doesn't matter. Except as you go into different dimensions, each side would represent another carrier wave. So a 7th dimensional existence, a planet, has a lot of carrier waves. And the system is probably going through it in sequence over and over and over again, extremely fast. Maybe at Planck's time, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows except the people who did that Hebrew alphabet. They knew. By the way, it wasn't an alphabet at the time. I call them many times symbols, because that's really what it was. I think what we're looking at was a computer programming language. So anyway, so I think that's why the atoms are going in a circle, because it's going through 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, the first 3 dimensions. And this slight difference in how the thing sends its carrier waves, or its information, is what's causing it to not exactly go to the same location. An example, I put this here so I remind myself, an example that every human, I think human, could relate to is deja vu. It happens for probably less than a second, maybe 2, and you see some innocuous thing. I remember once, it was an open field at one's camp. I was 13 years old, I think, and it was just a scene. And it hit me like I dreamt it before. And we all rationalized it. Gee, we dreamt this before. It just happened. You get a weird feeling, and all of a sudden it goes away. Now, the psychological definition is we all got, we all had, not a stroke, but something like that happen in our brains. So we can't all go crazy for one brief second and that's it. What I think is happening someplace in this dihole, for some unknown reason, we're getting 2 signals. We're getting the cognition immediately right from the dihole, the information itself in the first dimension, and then we get it through our physical senses, our eyes, our smell, feeling, and stuff like that. We get a second signal. It's almost like feedback, an echo. But it's not that. We're just getting 2 signals briefly, and then it corrects itself and it goes away. I think that's an example we could all understand. That's why I call it theory of multidimensional reality. We exist in basically 3 different dimensions or 4 dimensions almost the same time. You know, in the dihole, a transmission dimension, then finally a created reality. But that is why this thing reverses. When it's a massive piece of information, and all the information that makes this thing up, the time of the reversal, its poles flip, and then the result of that, it goes in the other direction. That's what happens, which gives you that on the West Coast. This time the West Coast gets this, and the East Coast gets that. As for the water goes over the continental shelf, it'll dig deeper canyons along here. It's real obvious this is done by rushing water, lots of it. I wanted to make this short. Dye-Hole Foundation is a nonprofit foundation. Contributions are used for the research and hiring more geologists and researchers. I hope you liked it. I gave you a good scientific explanation of why this thing happens. The next video, which I hope to get out in a few days, will be the 2 ways how to save yourself, the hard way and the easy way to save yourself from this polar reversal.